Today, we're reviewing a very impassioned submission, arguing that fringe right-wing elements have adopted the exact same virtue signaling and scapegoating tactics as the extreme left, using recent anti-Zionist protests and flag burning as the primary evidence.
Yeah, it's a really intense piece.
Right, so let's just dive immediately into the first critique here. The material's dismantling of heavy accusations like apartheid and genocide relies heavily on conversational logic, which inadvertently leaves the door open for critics to dismiss the core argument.
Exactly. The weakness here is all about how those massive, heavy terms are being handled.
Right.
I mean, the piece tries to debunk these claims of, an Israeli genocide and apartheid, mostly through population statistics. And there's this really poignant personal anecdote about the creator's father in Zimbabwe.
Yeah, attending the first integrated school before 1980, it's a great story.
It is. It's a great story. And on a surface level, that approach is, it's emotionally resonant, right? It appeals to our basic, everyday understanding of what fairness or discrimination looks like.
Sure, it makes a lot of common sense.
But here is the critical flaw. That approach assumes the listener already shares your baseline definitions of these incredibly charged words. It completely ignores the actual legal or sociological frameworks that the opposing side is using to make those claims in the first place.
Right, because conversational logic only really works when you're debating something subjective. Like, whether a movie is good or bad.
Yeah, exactly. But words like genocide and apartheid, they aren't just colloquialisms. They're codified international legal terms. They have highly specific parameters from places like the UN or the Rome Statute.
So the rebuttal just feels, incomplete to someone who is actually skeptical?
Completely incomplete. A deeply academic listener is going to hear that Zimbabwe story and think, okay, that's one guy's lived experience, but that has literally nothing to do with the legal definition of apartheid. The argument never actually engages with the opponent's true premise.
So the suggestion then is to fortify these definitions by briefly steel-manning the opposing viewpoint before you dismantle it. We need to elevate the argument from a casual conversational rebuttal to a bulletproof thesis.
Yes, steel manning is crucial here. You have to articulate your opponent's strongest possible case first.
Right. Give me an example of what that looks like in practice for this.
Okay, so instead of just saying that a population increase inherently disproves genocide, which is pure conversational logic, the material needs to explicitly acknowledge the parameters the opposition claims are being met.
Like the UN Convention's definition?
Yeah, the one about the intent to destroy a national or ethnic group. You acknowledge that specific parameter out loud, and then you systematically crush that premise using the material's own strong factual points.
Got it. So you'd frame the context of, say, the 30,000 casualties over a span of several years directly against historical genocide metrics.
Exactly. Or you contrast it against standard military ratios of combatant to civilian deaths in modern urban warfare. Once you force your data into the context of their actual legal framework, their argument just dissolves.
Wow, okay. And I'm guessing we apply that exact same technique to the apartheid argument.
Oh, absolutely.
So I wouldn't just say that Arab Israelis have a good quality of life. I would explicitly contrast the legally binding segregation of South Africa or Jim Crow laws directly against the data points regarding the 2 million Arab Israelis.
That's precisely it. You point out their exemption from forced military service, but then show they still have full legal access to healthcare, welfare, and high political office.
Even seats on the Supreme Court.
Right. When you do that, the opposition's argument just collapses. You aren't just saying, hey, my anecdote beats your slogan. You're proving their slogan fails to meet the basic legal criteria of the word they're throwing around.
Now let me jump in here. As I understand it from the notes, the argument here is heavily tailored toward everyday people, specifically millennials and Gen Z, consuming this on social media.
Right, the TikTok crowd.
Yeah, so if we start demanding that the creator explicitly cite UN legal definitions and the Rome Statute, I have to push back a bit. Is there a risk of making a fiery, accessible commentary sound way too much like a dry legal brief? Does getting bogged down in legal definitions dilute the passionate tone?
That's a totally fair concern. You definitely don't want to turn a passionate video essay into a boring university lecture.
Exactly.
But this isn't about changing the tone. It's about anchoring the passion with undeniable, preemptive counterarguments. You can still be fiery, you know? You can still be aggressive and fast-paced.
But you just add a tiny bit of academic grounding.
Yeah, when you pause for just 10 seconds to preemptively destroy the exact academic argument your detractor is silently holding onto, you leave them with nowhere to hide. It actually makes the passion way more intimidating because it's backed by an impenetrable wall of facts.
Which leads us perfectly into the overall structure of how those facts are presented. So, critique 2. The progression between the various video reactions feels somewhat disjointed, masking the deeper underlying connection between the isolated examples.
The pacing here is definitely a massive weakness in terms of overall impact.
It jumps around a lot.
So much. I mean, we go from a governor candidate on the political right burning an Israeli flag straight to left-leading college students failing basic American civics trivia.
And then to an ex-pro-Palestine activist's realization about manipulated audio.
Right, and then finally to an analysis of foreign bot-filled comment sections. It's giving me whiplash.
Well, individually, every single one of those pieces of media is compelling. Like those street interviews with the college students failing to identify the First Amendment or the founding year of 1776. Those are undeniably shocking to watch.
Oh, they're deeply shocking. But the logical tissue connecting those uninformed college students to the woke right political candidate feels, really loose.
Yeah.
Currently, the structure reads more like a sequence of isolated reaction videos. It doesn't feel like a cohesive, singular thesis building momentum. The listener's just left thinking, okay, that video of the candidate was crazy, and this next video of the students is also crazy.
But they aren't seeing the invisible string pulling it all together.
Exactly.
Let's look closely at the section discussing the transition from the flag-burning politician to the college student. If I can offer an analogy here, right now the structure feels like a prosecutor walking into a courtroom and just laying out Exhibit A, Exhibit B, and Exhibit C on a table in front of the jury without ever giving an opening statement.
Oh, that's a perfect analogy.
The jury is just staring at a burned flag, a failed pop quiz, and a screenshot of a Qatari bot farm, but they have absolutely no idea what crime is actually being prosecuted. They're just looking at disconnected artifacts.
Yeah, and without that opening statement, the listener is doing way too much intellectual heavy lifting. They have to figure out why we just jumped from a conservative political candidate to clueless college kids.
It's a huge gap. So what's the suggestion here?
The suggestion is to introduce a powerful framing mechanism early on, something like the concept of performative ignorance. Use that to serve as the connective tissue that binds these disparate examples into one unified narrative arc.
Performative ignorance. Okay, so we would explicitly tell the audience that both the politician and the students are symptoms of the exact same cultural virus.
Right.
They both value in-group signaling over historical literacy. We connect the candidate's performative flag-frubbing directly to the student's inability to name the First Amendment or, the current vice president, J.D. Vance.
Yes. You frame both groups as substituting actual, rigorously acquired political knowledge with fashionable outrage. And by explicitly defining that mechanism, you explain the why behind their behavior.
Why do these college students pretend to have deeply held beliefs about geopolitical conflicts they know nothing about?
Because social media algorithms have trained them that social survival requires aligning with the tribe's dominant moral stance. They care way more about the aesthetic of the signal than the factual basis of the cream.
Wow. Yeah, and once you explain that mechanism to the audience, the flag-burning politician and the clueless student aren't separate topics they're identical manifestations of the same core problem.
Exactly. And then think about how this carries forward into the final section about the bot farms.
The argument naturally elevates. We aren't just laughing at silly internet comments anymore.
No, not at all. We're showing how this desperate need for performative signaling makes both the extreme left and the extreme right incredibly susceptible to foreign manipulation.
Right. If we look at it from the perspective of a hostile foreign actor like a Qatari bot farm, they don't care about our domestic culture war. They just want destabilization.
Yeah, they scan for polarized content, they artificially inflate it to create a false consensus, and then they just exploit the human desire to conform to that consensus.
Because if your audience cares more about looking righteous than actually knowing the facts, they become incredibly easy marks.
Boom. Suddenly, your script isn't just reacting to internet videos. You're revealing a systemic national security vulnerability born entirely from vanity.
That completely changes the scale of the argument. It builds undeniable momentum. But this brings us to a really critical tension, which is critique 3. It's about who exactly this argument is designed to reach.
Right.
The script explicitly states a noble desire to illuminate and educate those who are merely ignorant, yet the frequent use of alienating terminology works directly against this stated goal.
Yeah, this is a classic conflict between the stated intent of a piece and its actual rhetorical execution. The weakness lies in how the creator categorizes and addresses their target audience.
The creator specifically notes they want to work with the ignorant, right? To pull millennials and Gen Z away from the propaganda.
Yes, but then throughout the audio, they repeatedly refer to these exact same people as stupid, or deranged, or a sad case.
There's actually a pretty lengthy segment where the creator says, "We're dealing with a lot of stupid people. Stupid is still a thing, and stupid is prevalent."
Yeah, I heard that. And look, if the ultimate goal of the creator is simply to vent their frustration or just preach to a choir of people who already agree with them, then sure, that language works fine.
It gets cheers from the base.
Right. But if the explicitly stated goal is to reach those who have fallen for this woke mind virus on either the right or the left, opening the door with insults is a catastrophic failure of persuasion.
It just doesn't work neurologically.
Exactly. When you call someone stupid, their amygdala fires. They enter a physiological state of fight or flight. Their brain literally routes information away from the prefrontal cortex, which handles logic, and moves it straight to defense mechanisms.
So a misinformed but highly reachable listener instantly becomes defensive.
And they tune out completely. Persuasion becomes physically impossible at that point.
I can see what you're going for. Let's see how we can strengthen this. But I have to play devil's advocate for just a second. Doesn't the raw, unfiltered frustration give this material its authentic edge?
It does, but
Like the creator is clearly exhausted by all the rampant hypocrisy. If we come in with a red pen and remove all the words like stupid or deranged, do we risk sanitizing the creator's unique voice? I just worry that making it too polite kills the punch.
that is a very common fear when editing passionate material. But the suggestion here is absolutely not to soften the blow. We do not want to sanitize the voice or make it polite.
Okay, then what's the fix?
The suggestion is to shift the rhetorical crosshairs, direct that immense frustration and sharp language away from the victims of the propaganda, and aim it squarely at the architects and the mechanisms of the deception.
Ah, I see. You keep the aggressive edge, but you use it strategically.
Yes. So, for example, when looking at the college students who believe Israel is an apartheid state but have no clue about basic American history,
Instead of saying we're dealing with a lot of stupid people, we pivot. We use that exact same aggressive energy to say, look at how ruthlessly this propaganda machine exploits historical illiteracy.
exactly, you attack the system for preying on the young rather than attacking the young for being prey. Military strategists call this offering a golden bridge.
A golden bridge. I like that.
Yeah, you have to give people a way to retreat and change their minds while still saving face. If you call them stupid, their identity is tied to their wrong belief, and they'll just dig their heels in to protect their ego.
But if you tell them they've been conned by a highly sophisticated, billion-dollar manipulation machine, they don't have to feel stupid.
Exactly. They can feel angry at the machine instead. They will gladly walk across that golden bridge and join you in tearing the machine down.
That makes perfect sense. And we apply that same shift in crosshairs to the comment section filled with AI photo. We emphasize the insidious nature of the manipulation.
Right. Call the Qatari bot farms deranged or sinister. Expose how they are actively trying to manipulate the American public.
So you keep all the fire, all the aggression, and the righteous indignation. But you're essentially telling the misinformed listener, hey, you aren't stupid, you are being manipulated, and I'm standing right here to show you how they're doing it.
That is the absolute essence of persuasive rhetoric. It transforms the creator from an angry, judgmental critic standing across from the audience into a protective guide standing right next to them, pointing out the traps together.
That's how you sharpen the spear without losing the edge. I love that. Well, that brings our analysis full circle beautifully. Let's briefly recap the 3 core areas for improvement discussed in this critique.
Sounds good.
First, fortifying the definitions of heavy terms like genocide and apartheid. By steel-manning the opposing views and contrasting them with specific, codified legal contexts and historical data, the arguments become structurally airtight. moving way beyond simple conversational logic.
Second, utilizing a thematic bridge. By introducing a framing mechanism like performative ignorance, the creator can seamlessly connect the various, seemingly disconnected video reactions into a single cohesive narrative thread.
And third, calibrating the tone, redirecting that sharp, frustrated, authentic edge away from the victims of the propaganda and aiming it squarely toward the mechanisms and architects of manipulation.
Right, making sure the material bypasses the audience's defense mechanisms and actually persuades them, rather than alienating them right out of the gate.
Exactly. We want to thank the listener for submitting such a passionate, engaging, and thought-provoking piece. We highly encourage you to implement these structural and tonal adjustments and submit the revised work back to the critique for a follow-up review. Until next time.